Hey YouTube, this is Marcus or Garwin again with another video. I'm starting my next PC build here. This build is going to be for my little 2-year-old girl, Hermione. This is going to be the one that goes into her bedroom to stream movies from our home server, to watch Netflix, Hulu, play some low-end child's games, and things of that nature. And the reason we're going with a Windows 10 PC is because that gives me the ability, a little bit more control over, I can monitor remotely through our family Microsoft accounts. I can control what websites she can and can't visit, what applications she can and can't run, and things of that nature. And it also gives us the flexibility to not only use it for Netflix and Hulu and streaming solutions, but if if she wants to play a game, which she's starting to kind of work her way into, she has that ability. So with this build, I probably will spend even less money than I did on the living room PC build. If you haven't seen those videos, I'll put a card up here somewhere to link you to that playlist. So I'm not even gonna have a dedicated graphics card in this thing. I'm going with the AMD A10 7890K APU. I think it's $150 right now. It's a quad core clocked at 3 point some odd gigahertz with Radeon R7 integrated graphics. And a decent CPU. It's essentially the same as the Athlon X4 880K, I believe, except the CPU was underclocked just a little bit so that they could make room for the integrated graphics without worrying too much about temperature. But anyway, I got the case and the motherboard in the mail today. I'm going to start putting it together. I'm just going to go ahead and mount the motherboard in here so that it's all taken care of. And I thought I would show you guys what all we've got here. So we have a DIY PC, DIY-F2-P case. The fan, it comes with 2 fans pre-installed that are purple and LED illuminated. It's got 1 intake and 1 exhaust. I believe they're both 140 millimeters. They might be 120, but I think they're both 140. I'll put a link in the description to the product page for this. This is a micro ATX and ITX case, so of course we can go with micro ATX motherboards. The motherboard I chose was the MSI A68HM Grenade motherboard. The reason I chose that motherboard is because it actually supports DDR3 1866 megahertz. Like I said, this is going to be an integrated graphics sort of media center build for my little girl's room, but I did want the option of using the higher speed RAM without actually overclocking things and maybe making things get a little bit warmer than they need to be. So I went with this motherboard, and I'm a fan of MSI products. I'm a kind of person that if I buy a product from a particular company and I have a good experience with that product, I'm more likely to buy products from that company again in the future. I've already unboxed the motherboard here. I'm going to go ahead and get the motherboard mounted in the case. None of the other components are here, but I'll go ahead and get the motherboard mounted because everything else, including the power supply, has to plug into this. So we'll go ahead and get the side off the case and get started on that here in just a second. So the first order of business, now that we've got the cables out of the way, is to insert the I/O shield. Alright, so the next step, we lower the motherboard in here and we attempt to line up the I/O ports. Now, one thing you want to watch for with the I/O shield is that you can see they've got these little horizontal pieces that sort of separate the ports. Those are fine, but all on the back side here, there's also these little things. There's one here, there's one here. Sometimes these will actually bend down so that they obstruct ports, and you'll wonder why in the world that you're getting resistance. Make sure these are actually bent up like this so that they clear these ports and kind of guide them where they're supposed to go, instead of actually sticking down in front of, say, your Ethernet port in this case, and obstructing the port. Alright, so you can see that on each of these ports, like that one and the Ethernet and the PS2 port here, that those tabs are sticking in and just slightly pressing down on the port, so that you might have to like L the motherboard into position, but that helps guide things into place and hold everything steady after they're in here. They should not be bent down obstructing your ports. And so now what we want to look for if you want to look for standoffs, we can see we've got one lined up here and here and here. We do not have one lined up with this hole, but that's not the end of the world. There's one lined up with that one. Every other hole in here has a standoff lined up with it. I'm going to check real quick. Do we have a hole even there? Yes, okay. So I can move this standoff up one position and we'll be good to go. Alright, so we've got here a 3/16 socket. Alright, for this motherboard. You don't want to bear down on these too tight. Once they feel sort of snug, leave them alone. So now we can see here we have the standoffs lined up with every hole on the motherboard. So now we've got our Phillips screwdriver, and we have the spare standoffs that came with the case here. And so what we, since it came with a couple different screws, I've gone ahead and tested them out to see which one of these screws are the ones that are actually threaded to fit the standoffs. Now you may want to check this before you mount your motherboard if you don't have any standoffs spare that are identical, because the type of head on the screw is not always an indication as to what kind it is. So check and make sure which one actually threads into your standoffs before you put the motherboard in place. I just happen to have a few spare standoffs here, so we've got 6 of these guys, and we'll go ahead and start putting them in place. Now when I'm screwing these in, I always turn them backwards until they pop, and that tells me that the threads are lined up and I'm not going to cross thread the screw. Now the same thing with these. You want them snug, but especially since this is the first one, I'm just going to stop there and then come up here, because I'm going to have to push the motherboard a little bit and get it lined on up and put in the rest of these screws. Alrighty, so you can see that all of the mounting screws are in place. So now I can go ahead and start connecting the case fans and the port headers for the USB ports and things of that nature. And for these guys, these go actually right here, I do believe. And but now for these, I will need the user manual. So let me figure out how the pinout goes on these, and we'll be back. With the switches, it doesn't matter positive or negative. So if your cables aren't labeled positive and negative on the switches, like this case isn't, it doesn't really matter, because you're really just creating a short. But with the LEDs, the positive and negative does matter, because if you hook them up backwards, the LEDs won't work. And that's it for today. We got the motherboard installed. We got everything connected that can be connected, except for this fan, because we don't have a second fan header on this motherboard. But we got some basic cable routing started. We got all of our front header cables connected here. And so next will either be, we still need a processor, we need RAM, we need a power supply, and we need a hard drive. I'm not going to worry about 3.5 inch. I'm just going to get a small 2.5 inch SSD, stick it right here, call it a day. This motherboard has integrated graphics, which is what we're going to be using for this build. So we'll get away a little bit cheaper than we would otherwise. Alright, so we got the computer put back together. I did leave out the PC speaker because the pins on the PC speaker connection do not line up with where the wires are on this PC speaker that came with the case. So I'm not going to worry about it. The days of playing old DOS games and using this as your primary sound device are long gone. All they're really used for is post codes if there's a problem. So I'm just going to leave it sitting here and order parts as I can, and I will record another video when I order the next part and show you what it is and how to install it. If you guys have any comments, questions, concerns, or suggestions, please feel free to post them in the comment section below. If you have not yet seen the video I did on me putting together the living room PC, I'll put a card linking to it here. And as always, this is Marcus out. Y'all have a good one.